Wouldn't it be nice to have several thought leaders in your industry know and love your brand? Start a podcast. Invite your industry's thought leaders to be guests on your show and start reaping the benefits of having a network full of industry influencers. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to B2B Growth. I am your host for today's episode, Nikki Ivy with Sweetfish Media. I've got with me today Desiree Daniels, and she is with Autodesk, but Desiree's not here to talk about work. She's here to talk about sort of the larger implications of building a community in the industry that she works in and using bootstrapping a podcast as a vehicle to help advance that initiative. Desiree, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Nikki.
Yeah, no, I'm super excited. I was saying it's going to be a little meta to be talking on a podcast about how to use a podcast, but it's something I am super passionate about as well. And then I think that a lot of folks, particularly folks in ABM, I know you said that that's your area of expertise here or that you work in. And so particularly folks in ABM, I think could stand to learn a lot from the way that you in particular, the way that you think about how you use the podcast and how valuable it's been to you outside of any revenue. But before we get into any of all that, I'd like you to just give us a little bit of background on yourself and what you've been up to these days.
Sure. So, I guess to get started, I've been working in tech for the last 10 years, mostly starting my career in a traditional integrated campaigns role, developing global campaigns for companies to help really resonate with their consumer base across the world. And then after that, I was exposed to account-based marketing, kind of before it was this trendy, sexy genre of marketing. And I feel like I'll never go back. It is such a cool way to be customer first and working really closely with the sales team. But yeah, that's pretty much what I'm up to today is working with my sales team, driving revenue and building out account plans for our top customers.
Good stuff. So, and a lot of that you talked about, I think it does inform your approach, but it is again, like sort of it's distinctly different from this endeavor, right? Of this passion project with the podcast as you use it. And I'm excited to get into some of the things that you're doing with it here in a second. But first, just give us a little bit of, an overview of why you think it's important for folks to build an ABM community.
Yeah, I think something that's so great about marketers is they love to engage. That's one of the key values or assets that a good marketer should have is how to relevantly engage with audiences. And that often means each other. It's a small space, technology marketing. A lot of us run into each other. We may be looking to solve similar problems. It could be same problem, different angle. So I love the fact of, creating a community where we can learn from each other's successes and even failures and have that really stir important conversations as we continue to drive the industry into the future.
Yeah. And one of the things that happens within that community that you described when we were talking offline is this idea of marketing with intention. Talk to me about how you foster that within this community, this ABM community that you're building.
Yeah. So one of the things that I've seen a lot in account-based marketing is over time, like we've seen a lot more technology become available in the space, and people struggle with personalization and how to accomplish personalized campaigns at scale. And, some companies employ technology to do that. But in reality, I think it boils down to understanding the person that you're marketing to, not just the persona, not just the select group of accounts, but the actual person that's making the buying decision. And I think that that's, such an important part of working in account base is knowing how to identify with the human. So in building this community, it all kind of spurred with how do we humanize marketing? How do we humanize what you buy? And that's kind of where we got this concept to start a podcast that is totally vendor agnostic. It's formed by ABM practitioners. We interview sellers, we interview entrepreneurs, of course, marketers, and even psychologists. Like we try to keep our topics wide and ranging, but the idea here is to relate to the human, because at the end of the day, that is who is buying, an actual human. And I don't want marketers to ever lose sight of that.
Yeah, you're a woman after my own heart. These are the things that I talk about every day, right? Like when we use these terms, right? Buyers, sellers, marketers, leaders, thought leaders. Behind each of those titles, of course, like you said, is a person. And so it only stands to reason that building a community would be the way to get the best or the most out of those individuals, right? For their own good and also for the advancement of whatever business initiatives that they might have. But one of the things that is cool about, your approach to building the community and marketing with intention is the way that you use the podcast as a vehicle for relationships in a way that encourages folks in this community to think beyond revenue. Dig into that a little bit for us.
Yeah, so I think every marketer, entrepreneur, and seller can agree that revenue, for the most part, every day is our number one priority. We are sellers and marketers by trade. But one thing that I think is really important about this particular podcast and why I get excited to do it every day is we are not here to generate revenue. That's not the point of this podcast. It's not affiliated with my company that I work for. It's literally just a space for us to share notable stories from our careers, hopefully inspire other marketers and sellers to generate their own creative solutions to problems. And it's a way for us to come together and really drive the industry forward and to have important conversations that are critical for account-based, for selling to continue to iterate on itself. There's so much stimuli out there with when you're being marketed to, when you're marketing to customers as well. I think, I don't know if I'm allowed to cuss, but there's a lot of bullshit that you have to sort through as a recipient of some of these materials. And I think there's a lot of onus on marketers that are practicing today and sellers to get it right and to be really relevant. And revenue, of course, is the end goal there. But this avenue is a way for us to express ourselves and see how we find those creative solutions to generate the engagement, the revenue, the sales that we're hoping to get in our respective roles and, with campaigns that we're running or initiatives.
I love it. I love everything about it. And I hadn't, talked to anybody who was doing it, who was in an industry that typically would be doing this to advance, it's on their roadmap to advance some revenue generating thought leadership initiative. That's, the vein in which I'm mostly talking to folks about this, but somebody who has sort of the opportunity to do that, but has said, you know what, I'm going to do it for the love. I'm going to do it for the community because as you were saying to me offline, it takes a village. And so that was really good. Thank you so much for laying all that out for us. And now Desiree, that I have successfully picked your brain and seen what I can get out of it, I am interested in what you are putting in it. So what learning resource are you engaging with? What are you reading and listening to that's, informing your approach or got you excited these days?
Yeah, honestly, kind of bootstrapping this. Like, we do not have the resources of a company trying to put together a podcast. We're literally marketers with day jobs, and on our weekends and our evenings, we sit together and we say, okay, who do we want to learn from next?
Mm-hmm.
Who is someone that is really making waves in their space, whether they're a psychologist or an art director, a seller, an entrepreneur? I think there's all something that we can learn cross-functionally that we can employ in our own roles and in our own creative space. And listening to a lot of podcasts, definitely listening to B2B Growth, Flip My Funnel. There's a lot of learnings on how to have a voice and how to create space, facilitate space for people to feel comfortable enough to share what their journey has been so far and what they're working on. Just a lot of listening to other podcasts, seeing how things are structured, the kinds of questions they ask, and really getting to the root of the issue in a way that's digestible for listeners. So that's honestly what I've been doing. And then kind of learning along the way how to bootstrap. Like, how do we make sure that our calendar is getting set up? We have automated scheduling emails that go out. So it feels like a really good process and experience for our guests. So they feel like it was a positive experience coming on air.
Yeah, it's like you read my diary. We share a lot of the same values and goals. And I knew it. I called it. But I know there's going to be other folks listening to this who are going to want to, connect with you and follow along with, what your journey and what you're doing with us. First of all, tell us the name of your podcast, and then tell us how to connect with you.
Sure. So the podcast is called Humanize What You Buy. It's on Spotify as well as the podcast app /iTunes. And we basically try to post new episodes at least every week. The best way to get in contact with me, if you're interested in being on the podcast, is Desiree at humanizewhatyoubuy.com. I'm also on LinkedIn, Desiree Daniels. Feel free to add me. I'd love to build on this community. And I'm just so happy to be here and talk a little bit about this journey that we're on to learn from other sellers and marketers. And hopefully our listeners will do the same.
Thank you so much, Desiree. You've been, between me and you, one of the most pleasant and just like soothing and yet really engaging people that I've been able to have a conversation with here. So I'm so glad you came on the show. So glad we connected, and it was really refreshing to talk about what it is that I do every day in a way that's not at all connected to but how is it going to make me money? Do you know what I mean? So thanks for that, Desiree. I hope you have a good day.
Anytime. And I feel like you need to come on Humanize What You Buy, Nikki, so we can talk about your experience as a podcaster and with Sweetfish Media. I think that would be so cool to kind of marry, like you said, meta, bringing it full circle, podcast to podcast.
Thanks so much, Desiree. You have a good one.
You too. Thanks so much, Nikki.
We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big Three, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.